In these times of uncertainty, it's all the more important that we keep collaborating, informing, and inspiring each other, so that we can be smarter and better tomorrow. Welcome to the Pakhuis de Zwijger livecast.
Welcome at Pakhuis de Zwijger. Thank you for watching. This is Tech for Society live from Amsterdam via Salto, YouTube, Facebook and dezwijger.nl. My name is Servas and today is an episode on cybersecurity, security in the city, and it's part of a mini-series on cybersecurity and the city. After a few words in Dutch, I'll continue in English. Welkom bij Pakhuis de Zwijger. Vandaag is in het Engels, omdat we een aantal sprekers hebben die helaas geen Nederlands spreken. Volgende week zijn we weer terug met een volledig Nederlandstalige uitzending. En dan gaat het over het veiligheidsbeeld voor de metropoolregio Amsterdam. Hoe goed zijn we beschermd tegen ongelukken en dreigingen, digitale dreigingen van buitenaf. But today will be in English. And I have a few quite interesting speakers from all over the world. From live here in Amsterdam, I talk with Ger Baron. And Ger is the Chief Technology Officer of the City of Amsterdam. We talk with Annette Nouma, and she is a Digital Transformation Advisor at Estonia. We talk with Ben Severny, and he is founder and president of the Foundation for Public Code. Also based partly in Amsterdam, thank you for joining. And we talk with Bianca Wiley, and she is Open Government Advocate and co-founder for Tech Reset Canada, but also connected with Toronto Street Labs. We talk with all of them today. Of course, we also talk with you via Zoom. If you want to participate, please ask your questions in the Q&A chat function on Zoom, and then the production will send the questions to me here on this iPad. But we start with Amsterdam, with Ger. Ger, thank you for joining. Today we talk about questions like how can we safeguard our city's online security, who is responsible for keeping online threats at bay, and what is the role of government, companies and citizens in online security. Ger, as Chief Technology Officer, of course you're always working on these kind of questions. Can you say how safe the city of Amsterdam is when it comes to online security?
Well, I mean, yes and no. I think actually next week there's a whole episode about how safe Amsterdam is according to our own indicators. But I would say, I mean, it differs a bit per part of what you see in the digital safety or the digital world, basically. I mean, partly we're pretty safe when it comes to, I would say, IoT networks in Amsterdam or telco networks, etc. I mean, probably relatively safe. Yeah. But when you see what happens with communications sometimes to kids or hacking of banks or DDoSing, I mean there's a lot of work to do as well. So I think compared to other cities, I would say relatively safe. But I think we need to keep up the speed to keep it that way. But also there's a lot of work to do to be even more safe anyhow.
So what does it even mean to be safe when it comes to digital security? Yeah. Is that...
I would say, I mean, for us, goes basically the same things that it's in a physical environment, I would say. I mean, the ability to walk around freely without other people interfering in your data, your world, your life in a digital sense. It's about honesty, meaning that you will not be discriminated or other people nudge you in a way you don't want to, etc. And I think it's about the relation between the physical and the digital world. So the stuff that happens in the physical world that's not allowed to happen sometimes has a reflection in the digital world, and the other way around. There happens a lot of things in the digital world that has a big impact on the physical infrastructures in the physical world. So I mean, for us, it's about how can people move around freely in a way that's honest and that's basically for the way they want to.
Yeah, like in normal public space, physical public space. So there's a lot of connection, obviously, between physical public space and digital public space.
I mean, the problem is basically that, I mean, the metaphor of public space, I mean, seems very easy to make, but also has a lot of, issues from a certain point of view, because the solution is totally different. I mean, in the end, you want to we create as much freedom for everybody as possible. We want to create as much insight in what's happening around you as possible. But on the other hand, I mean, the solutions are not setting up more people out in the streets. The solutions are way more in the technology, in the software, and the solutions are totally different. So I would say for the goals you want to achieve, you can use the metaphor of the public space like I just did, but when you think about what's really happening, I mean, that's actually fundamentally different.
And what kind of threats do we have to think about? Last week, we had this episode here in Tech for Society, which was in Dutch. We talked about that quite a large group of entrepreneurs in Amsterdam is on almost a yearly level hit by online cybercrime.
Yeah. So I mean, SMEs, but also larger companies, obviously. In the Netherlands, University of Maastricht nowadays is a big case that fell into a ransomware trap, basically. But first people hacked in, and then they put in ransomware. So that was a bit more advanced than only something to click in an email.
Yeah.
So it hits everybody. So it hits kids at school by cyberbullying. It hits companies by, maybe CEO fraud or something else. It hits cities varying from DDoS to hacks to stealing data. So it's basically on every level things are happening. And I think we're very lucky there's not a big impact into the energy networks or the transport networks, etc. But obviously, I mean, this still is a threat as well. So, I mean, it's happening everywhere around you and we don't even notice it. And the big thing is that, I mean, we like to hide it. I mean, we as society, I mean, we want to be honest and transparent about physical crime. What you see right now is that banks actually are not communicating about what happens with cyber theft.
But what is the reason? Why do you want to hide
this? And when a network goes down, it's never cyber, it's always technical infrastructure. So
yeah. But why would you want to do that? You should be...
Yeah, because companies have a big benefit that they actually want to have people to trust the services, even digital, because in the end it's cheaper and better and earning more money. So it's the same as, with banks, they never told us about when cars with money were robbed, whatever, because they want to have you to think that the infrastructure is safe and it's cheaper to just pay for the stuff that's stolen and the money that's stolen than talk about, hey, our bank has been hacked for the last year for 5 times and they stole money from your account. They prefer to put it back. And I think this still happens a lot when we don't know how many energy outages are actually caused by people on the internet who actually on a remote way are shutting stuff down. We don't know. Nobody communicates about it.
And next week we talk about the safety security assessment for the whole metropolitan region of Amsterdam. Could you say a few, what are we talking about in the higher level? So we have this threat at a local level, personal level, or business level. But what is cybersecurity when it comes to cities? What kind of scale do we have to think about?
Well, I mean, in the whole broad way, I mean, everybody sees cybercrime. I mean, varying from distributing, let's say, fake news to cause harm. Mm-hmm. I mean, fake news, everybody sees fake news every day.
With all the impact of fake news on elections.
Something that's illegal. Uh-huh. Stuff like phishing emails basically happens to everybody as well. Not everybody clicks on it. And actually, when people click on it, they quite a few times are a bit ashamed that they clicked on it because it feels a bit stupid to click on it. Yeah. Well, a lot of people are doing it, so we don't know it as well. Not a lot of people actually go to the police to say that they clicked the link in their email because they're a bit ashamed and feels a bit stupid. So they pay the €50 and €100. So we don't know, but it's an increase. I mean, I think we're having in many domains, there's 10, 15, 20% increase year over year.
Thank you. We have a question from Zoom. And the question is Ger looking into cities or countries when you talk about cybersecurity? So do you work together with other metropolitan regions in the world and other countries and other cities?
Yeah, and on several levels. First of all, I mean, it's fairly new for us to look at cyber security, let's say, or digital safety in a broader way than our own infrastructure. So up to 5, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, we didn't see a big role for the city. Mm-hmm. in all this cyberbullying, etc. It was educational system or etc. So now we see more and more a role for the city. And then we started to talk about, let's say 5 years ago, a lot with cities like, Washington, D.C. or New York, Barcelona, Helsinki, a bit to Tallinn as well, actually, just to see what can be a role of a local government compared to a national government. Well, the industry, telcos, example given, play a big role. Platforms play a big role. Social media plays a big role, etc. So we try to find our role. But the thing is that everything that happens, digitally and something stolen, most of the time has a physical impact. When somebody steals money, there's also a person on a place actually whose money it is who feels the harm. When you're cyberbullying somebody, there's always a kid in the school or somebody else, but a kid in the school who feels the harm. So there's always a location that comes with it. So we more and more see a role for the city to pick up this part of it. And also the cascade effects between the several infrastructures, for example, given. When energy will go down, it's interesting to see what happens to the telco network. When the telco network goes down, see what happens to the water networks or to public space management, etc.
So the impact will be that if there's a threat, for example, at the electrical level, at the electrical network, then it has an impact on the telecommunication network, it has an impact on the water networks, and of course in the Netherlands, where we're here right now, we're quite a way below sea level, so that's a problem. So
that also mentioned the credit card machines at supermarkets, etc. When they don't work anymore, a lot of supermarkets only do the cash, card only, but they don't accept cash anymore. And probably in 10 years, this will be the new normal. So, we also look into solutions that maybe we should keep cash, actually, even not because we wanted to from privacy, etc. Could be a good reason as well, but also from a safety perspective. What if the energy networks or the telco network goes down? Nobody can buy food. Will be a disaster.
This is quite interesting. Thank you so much. Ger, you were supposed to be here, actually, but because of the strange situation with Corona, I'm on my own in the studio. You probably would have noticed this big table and just me. I'm here with the team of Pakhuis. We're all together with the 4 speakers from all over the world, of course, via Zoom. Ger, please do join us for the rest of the evening. And the rest of you, of course, we are trying to have this conversation with all 5 of us at the end of the hour. So Ger, thank you so much for now. And let's go to another example, namely to Estonia. In Estonia is called the most advanced digital society in the world. That is quite a title. What does that mean, and why is Estonia so focused on digital societies? About that, we talk with Annette Numa, and as I said, she is connected to Estonia. Annette, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm very happy to be here. And you get all to your answer. So why we are the most digital society is that because we have been doing things online already, even before the time of Corona, so for a very long time already. And today we have 99% of our public services fully accessible online. So the only things now after the crisis that we can't do online is just getting married and getting divorced. So that's about it.
But that is so all new questions right now, because you would expect that like voting would be something that is difficult to do online and getting a marriage license would be easy, but apparently a lot of conversation starters. Estonia started Estonia in 2007 after the largest cyber attack on any sovereign country in the world. What happened?
So there is actually a lot of fake news about our cyber attack in 2007. We had some kind of internal crisis here, and then I'm not going to name a country, but there was one country who thought that it's great time now to attack us. So as I said, there's plenty of fake news about that, because they say in some other states that we were fully attacked, but that is actually not correct, because what they tried to do was just to take down some of the media platforms, and then they also attacked one of our private banks. So they were the only ones that actually lost some of the information there. But actually, we were super lucky because we didn't lose any other information, because Estonia has been using decentralized distributed network called X-Road. Yeah. So we exchange information on a decentralized way. So there is no any kind of large database where we would store our information, and where it would be very great to hackers to go in and actually get some information. So we actually gave a very hard time for the hackers, I would say. So, but that was, of course, a wonderful lesson for us, because that was a time where we realized that these kind of things can happen and they will continue to happen in the future, and that we need to pay more attention, especially on cyber aspects.
So for you, this was the point to fully switch to a digital society. And how do you decide when to stop? Because you're also talking about e-law, e-justice, e-police. This sounds quite invasive, but also quite fragile.
We're not going to stop anywhere, I would say, because, I mean, the future is going to look much brighter than it is even right now. And then we have, as you mentioned, like so many things are already working online. And if today we would have elections happening, there wouldn't be a problem that we would have to be worried about that people going to the polling stations, because we have been voting online already in the past 15 years. So this is, of course, also a very huge risk when you do voting online, but we have been investing to that very much. And we will continue to make our services not just working online, but making them working proactively, and actually just bringing these solutions that will be also already replaced by the AI solution. So digitalization can go very far, and this is what we're trying to do here.
So the digitalization gives you sovereignty, safety. Is that the reason you do this?
Yes, it actually has helped us to solve many problems, because what was where the need came to start building this was that we had a very high level of corruption, and also we were lacking of money in so many sectors, and there wasn't any trust between the government agencies and the citizens. So we thought that technology is going to help us here, and I can today clearly say that it did, because we just got the new statistics that around 85% of people trust our e-solutions, and this is a very high percentage.
Because from the Netherlands, it's perhaps quite difficult to understand. Our structures are, well, at least in place since the Second World War, but basically quite longer. We just celebrated 200 years of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. But for you, you just re-established your independence in 1991. So Estonia is a really young country. Would that be a explanation why your country decided to go this way?
I would say yes, and definitely being a small country was an advantage, and of course also it's much easier to build a digital state from a very scratch when you don't have anything in working there. So definitely, but it also requires a very great leadership, which we were lucky to have at that time. So our entire government was consisted of very young people who were actually willing to take a little bit more risky decisions than maybe the older politicians. So we always, when we work together with other governments, we say that there has to be a wonderful leadership coming, and some leaders who would take this digitalization process as one of their priorities, and we would suggest to go and follow that way.
Fine, yeah, we have a question online from John in Boston, and he's asking, is Estonia sharing all their knowledge for free with other countries? So can we as the Netherlands or Boston join you and ask you about how you do this and ask for questions?
Yes, that's now a right time to promote our eStonia Briefing Center. So you can all go to e-estonia.com. We offer our services there, and we, first of all, we make an overview of how this all has been possible in Estonia. And then we can also make you business engagement with the Estonian ICT companies who have been building these solutions, because they have been behind of all this success story. We haven't done that alone in a public sector only. So it's been a very huge public-private partnership since the very beginning of the days. And then what we do at the Estonia Briefing Center is to help the other countries to make connections with our ICT companies, and they can also get in contact with the consulting part. So we can help you to put on paper step by step where you should go if you want to have the same services and another success story in your region or in your country. So I would encourage all of you who are listening us right now to get in contact with us, and we can help you to make your digital story on another level.
And let's go to Ger quickly, because I'm quite interested in how much he knows about the topic of Estonia. Of course, well, put them all on screen. It's all good. Of course, you have a lot of connection with all of the world. We just talked about that, Ger. How much did you know about Estonia? Is this new for you? I guess not.
No, that's not at all. No. We saw a lot of presentations. Basically, every time Siem is in Amsterdam, we make a cup of coffee. So I think we're know quite well what's happening, basically, and on a national level with the Dutch Association of Municipalities, VNG. We actually look at their infrastructures as well. So we learned a lot of actually from their X road and everything. So
Annette, there's a lot of connection between Estonia and the Netherlands. That's good.
And I mean, with a lot of appreciation as well. I mean, it's obviously quite impressive what Estonia has done in the phase 1, basically. And I would say now, even when it's getting more mature, I think even the lessons are even more interesting.
Annette?
Yeah, from our side, I mean, as I mentioned already before, we're happy to work with everyone. And I would say that Netherlands and Estonia share very fundamental same values in respecting the privacy and the data protection side. So that's why we're mostly open to work with countries who have the same values and are representing the same fundamental bases as well. So that's why I would say fully that Estonia and Netherlands are working together, like just on dual relationships, and of course also by the European Union level.
Thank you. We have a question for you, Annette. Peter, no location. Are the inhabitants of Estonia trusting the government digitalization of the whole society? So how is the trust in society?
Yeah. So I brought out the number before, that it's around a little bit more than 80% of our people actually trust our e-solutions. And the trust has been increasing all the time. We just had the latest researches. So it's very important, especially how we make people to trust our systems, is to give as much as transparency as possible. So we have this very unique thing that we have such thing called data tracker, where all the citizens can have a look which government agency have been looking for their information. So I can see exactly when someone from the Tax and Custom Board have been checking my salary information, or if my doctor is opening up my last doctor visits, checking my medical records, I can also track that information. So if you give this kind of transparency to the citizens, then there is no way that they wouldn't trust us, because I fully feel, and what we also say to the citizens is, actually our information, our data fully belongs to the citizens, not the other way around. The government is just helping us to store this information. And right now, of course, also making their own decisions based on the information that they have been collecting. But it has to respectfully the GDPR regulations and all the data protection aspects as well.
So if this way I can always see what happened to my data, and I always sure and trust that everything people do with my data is trustworthy.
Exactly, and we encrypt information. We put like the timestamps there, so you can see absolutely everything. So it's of course also very limited access to the information. So we don't have a large database where, I don't know, random government agency employees could just go and check each other information there. But you actually need to have a right to know this information, which we also use a once-only policy. So we of course also submit information only on one single time, and if one of the government agencies have been asking us this information once, then we don't have to provide that anymore. So again, to give people more time to deal with things that matter more than just going to different government agencies and managing and submitting their information for thousands of times.
Thank you so much. We'll join you in the end of the program. We'll come back to you, but thank you for now. Annette Numa from Estonia. Let's go to Ben Severny, and founder of Public Code. Ben, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
How are you today? How do you listen to this discussion?
I I find it really captivating. I think it's very promising for the future, because this is really sort of the core set of issues. Well, specifically the kind of dialogues around collaboration between, for instance, Amsterdam and Estonia, because sort of the Foundation for Public Code is focused on this type of collaboration. The remit is public code, as we sort of characterize it, is the sort of convergence of policy and software as all these public organizations go through digital transformation. We're sort of seeing that, we have evolved a very long process for understanding how policy is generated in some sort of transparent, accountable way. And more recently, we've been seeing that a lot of solutions that are provided to implement this policy in software come from proprietary providers that then move these sort of supposedly open systems into black boxes that are no longer governable. So the idea that public code is actually an open source sort of basis around which one can build a collaboration between public organizations that recognize that they need common tooling. So a lot of these things, like the Estonian the e-state solutions, or some of Amsterdam solutions, or solutions from Barcelona. All of these have been projects that we're engaged in now to look at how we can build sustainable code bases. This is the other thing that I think is really difficult, especially where security is concerned, is that in the public administration, a lot of times software is still considered to be a thing rather than a process. And software is definitely a process. This is what the software as a service companies have realized long ago, and that's why their offerings are so fundamentally different than what we used to know as software, because every time you open a Google product, it might be something different, because it's constantly changing. And if public administrations instead continue to procure things as things like, oh, we bought this system that is secure, and then they install it and don't really have a community of practice that is actively refactoring and bug fixing and moving these products forward, then it's just it's sort of frozen in time, and that provides kind of a set of inroads for adversarial forces to take advantage of exploits that still exist. And so public code is about recognizing that software is a dynamic system that's built out of a set of collaborators. And in this case, the set of collaborators are public institutions. And so our foundation provides this process, which is called code-based stewardship, which is about providing a sort of nexus around which, the code base and the community and the policy and the ecosystem of vendors can sort of organize so that they can make sort of an ongoing, sustainable, adaptive, replicable thing that can be utilized by, countless other administrations that have the same problems.
Thank you. Yeah, so now we know why public code is necessary. Kind of like, as you said, every time you open up Google, it's slightly different, or kind of why Microsoft 365 is a subscription-based instead of one thing. Like in the past, you bought Office and you had to pay one lump sum amount of money, and then it was yours until the next version was on. But now you have to pay subscription. Every month you have to pay again. But what is the foundation for public code in one sentence? What would you say is your foundation? And then what would you say is the need for your foundation?
The foundation is this set of services that provides code-based stewardship, which is focused around specific software products that allows them to scale between public administrations. So we do things, it's called we manage pull requests for a repository, which is where software lives. We manage a community system like a chat service or whatever that brings people together around a code base. We manage a set of interconnections between vendors and public administrations, the sort of actors in an ecosystem that would develop this code together. And then we manage this sort of we coordinate around letting people understand what the value of a product is, like a parking services administration tool or a K-12 schools management tool, or any of these types of e-state services that Estonia implements, like tax collection and some of these things, voting. These are all systems that various different members within the foundation's a membership-based organization, and each of the members of the foundation bring code bases that they've already developed in open source. A lot of times, there was sort of a history to the recognition in public administrations about the value of open source as a solution, in the sense that they had gone through this period where they suffered, sort of lock-in and exorbitant licensing fees, and they may have negotiated away some of their citizens' privacy rights. And now they kind of realize the error of their ways, and so they've started to implement things in open source. But open source is not something you can do on your own. Open source requires a community. It's about the diffusion of risk. It's about finding people to do kind of a barn raising of this continuous development. And so within municipalities, who are our main partners, a lot of times there is no remit to consider other municipalities in the, oh, we've built this great tool, wouldn't it be nice if another municipality used it? That's not how municipalities work. They're concentrating on their own citizens.
So they're focused on their own. There's one civil servant. So there's one civil servant focused on a certain topic, and they don't really work together or can share their ideas. So, but how can you, how would you say that these kinds of topics can make society safer? Is it? Well,
there are a couple ways. I mean, one, I would say, fundamentally, who is the society safe from? I think is a question we haven't really asked ourselves.
We still have to ask the question, or we still have to answer the question: are we going to keep the society safe? What means society? And of course, is it state versus all the people, or something in between? And what does it even mean? So these kind of questions, of course, I want to save for later at this program. But on a more fundamental level, me as a novice on this subject, can I look at open source software, and this is something everyone can look at. So also the bad guys know where the weak points are. Is that more dangerous?
Well, you have two circumstances. One is where the bad guys can know where the weaknesses are, but so can everyone else, including the good guys, to help you. And the other one is that no one knows where the weaknesses are except for two engineers inside of a private vendor. And then, you don't have the ability to audit this code. If you're a public administration, you can't say, I need to see how secure this code is. Some vendors, of course, will selectively give you access to their code base, but a lot of times they'll say, no, that's our secret sauce, and their secret sauce often is not actually very secure, it turns out. And they're just, because security is a thing that often happens only in hindsight. And unless you have an auditing process that allows you to have other eyes on that code base to say, is this thing really secure, or are you just saying that it is because it's easier to satisfy your contract and say, well, we can't show it to you because it's otherwise that would be a breach of our security protocol. Well, also it means that you don't actually have to hit the targets. So
in a nutshell, it's always safer to share knowledge about the whole code with everyone, so we can all anticipate where the trapdoors are, instead of,
to a certain extent, there are obviously issues around, security, like military code bases and things like that are not going to be made public, but certainly around things where things that operate in the public sector, in the public environment, those things are, do benefit from having audits. It's actually, a provable, there are papers written about these types of processes where people come in, both, professional companies, but also, enthusiasts. A lot of times, this is one of the things that's really interesting about open source code bases is that, it's a long tail of people that offer contributions to the code. And so, sometimes, a lot of times these mistakes are something very simple, that a port that's left open or something in a technical terms. These are not, giant problems to solve, but they're just problems that need many eyes to find these problems before they're exploited.
It's basically a many-eye solving situation. We have a question from Anna from Italy. For which governments are you working? Are you part of a government when you're working for or with them? So we kind of already answered that, but you are a fully independent foundation, right?
Well, we're technically a vereniging in the Dutch parlance, which is that we are an association, and we're an association owned by our members, and our members are public organizations. So to a certain degree, we are sort of a secondhand public organization. But we're working with governments across Europe primarily at this point, but we're talking to we're talking to states in the United States and cities in Southeast Asia, Australia, the Middle East, various places.
So in answer to Anna's question, when you are working together with government, you are not part of government, but just working very closely with them.
That's right.
And what would be your short-term and long-term goals when it comes to your foundation or association in the coming years? Did these goals change because of COVID, or is everything going quite the same?
Yeah, COVID particularly has been a moment for us, because a lot of what we, needed to express to the public organizations we were trying to make understand the value of what we were doing, first of all, was that software is now infrastructure, that over the course of, history, humans invent things all the time. And for the first 30 years, we call them technology. And then if they work, we call them infrastructure. Network services are going over this threshold right now. And infrastructure is something that's fundamentally different than a technology, in the sense that it's something people expect, and it essentially becomes a right. And once that is the case, there are very different mechanisms in society that have to provide that for everyone, because it has to be inclusive. It's not something that's just for a market driven elite. And so, in this circumstance, we're now, looking at governments that have found themselves suddenly going all remote, and they realize now that this is, of course, an infrastructure. Their parliaments are operating on Zoom, much like we're operating now. Their official documents are being passed around on Microsoft Teams, and these are all, totally fine solutions. But the reality of the situation is that doesn't leave total agency up to the administration. Their core infrastructures are now in the hands of third-party providers that allow them to operate, and that is in and of itself a security compromise. Regardless of whether somebody's penetrated your system, nobody had to penetrate your system for you to be using Zoom and have them, have access to the data that you're producing, or potentially, shut off your call if they don't like what you're saying. And so, the idea that this type, being able to provide core infrastructure for the function of governance via network services as a public infrastructure is now something that most governments recognize the value of and the necessity of. Also, the need to produce software at scale very quickly, like contact tracing applications for COVID, for instance, is something that I participated in a lot of, working groups within the European Commission and these Europe scale hackathons and things like that, where, everyone focused on what does it mean to be able to arrive at these solutions quickly. And the thing that is dropped in these panic situations a lot of the time is the need for these things to be sustainable and to be, products that can be carried forward into the future. Like a hackathon, hackathons I appreciate because they give people a sense of agency, but they often don't result in things that are usable as products because they don't build on the, the process, long-term scalable processes.
So by pushing it through, you skip over the idea of quality control and checking up. Ben, for now, thank you so much. I want to quickly look at Ger, because we heard a lot of different stories, both from Ben and from Annette. Again, for you all, probably not news, but still for most of us, it is news. How is Amsterdam tackling these kinds of security issues? Of course, we had the discussion about the Corona app on a national level, but is Amsterdam also forced to digitalize in a faster level?
Yeah, absolutely. And it also brings for us the necessity to actually invest substantially in not only in software, etc., but especially in the skills and people to understand the software. And understanding software is more logical when it's open source because you actually know what's going to happen. So that's why we work with Ben and others. And so I'm a big fan of his foundation as well, because we governments need people actually bring in knowledge, bring us together, actually lead us basically in how to get this not only as a special project, but make this a new normal within our organizations. And in some private sector industries, it's already normal to use open source for your brand software basically. And for us more and more, it's relevant not only from a principal point of view, because you want to be open and transparent as a government. You don't want to have closed algorithms, etc. You don't want to have hidden decision making inside the software. And on the other hand, for safety and security, I mean, I'm obviously open source is safer, more secure, without backdoors, etc.
Thank you so much. Let's go to Bianca Wiley, our final guest of tonight. Bianca is part of the, well, she's been here before in Tech for Society. Bianca, thank you for joining us. We've met the first time at We Make the City 2019, where you were part of our opening program for Pakhuis de Zwijger and the We Make the City Foundation. Always on the same topic. And when I look at your story, it doesn't seem a lot of things that changed, just the tempo changed, and the importance perhaps, or the urgency perhaps changed. How do you look at this discussion? For you, what do you hear when you listen to this program? Yeah, nice to be here again. I've got three points stuck out to me to build on this conversation so far. The first one that I know from the City of Toronto and its government and its IT and technology department is that security creates almost a fear-based mindset, which is that your technology systems have to be safe, which is important. But when you get into the kind of mindset that is about compliance and risk management and security, it's a lot easier sometimes to say no to other ways of thinking about technologies. And I think that's one thing that I think about is how do we make sure that we not only manage security issues and safety issues, but make sure that that's not the dominant or the only way that we think about technology, because we need to think about a lot of the opportunities that may come with a little more risk, but also come with a lot more benefit. So I think I've seen that vendors in technology communities and lawyers see that vulnerability in governments is that they can sell them on fear. Yeah. And that has taken up a lot of oxygen and a lot of money. So I think that's one remark that I'd like to pin to the wall for now. That's one thing. So the second thing is that security and privacy unto themselves don't mean anything if what they are used for isn't something we all want. And I have a couple examples of that. But just because a technology is private, is privacy enhancing or is security enhancing, if it doesn't even work well or do something that we all agree we want in our democratic society, it doesn't matter. And you would be surprised how many companies can sell technologies to governments on the basis of them being privacy preserving or security supported. So I'll give you an example. As Ben mentioned, the contact tracing apps. In Canada, we have an exposure notification app, and the entire conversation is about how it's maintaining your privacy. Nobody is talking about efficacy. How does it work or how does it not work? What is it doing? And it's amazing because somehow the entire conversation turned into privacy and not what does this thing even do? So there's a lot of technology theater around security and privacy. And then we miss the conversation about what is the outcome. The second example I would give to that point around what technology does to our public services is that if you think about people to people in our society, we talk about society, people to people, when they talk to each other, there's friction. When people engage with technology, often that friction is removed. So when you access a public service online and you're doing that independently, that might be good in one way from an efficiency perspective. But what are you losing when urban planners who are notorious for not going out into their community are doing their work remotely? And the story from Canada, people who worked in immigration, they learned a big lesson when they spoke to people who were trying to immigrate to Canada, because they learned something that when you immigrate to Canada, you have to send in a big package. Yeah. And the people who were trying to do that to come to Canada were terrified for the months and months and months until they heard from our government, we have your package. When they finally talked to the people who were trying to do this process, they realized, oh, we can build a notification to tell them, hey, your package is here. We don't know if you're immigrating here yet, but don't worry. This really important set of documents is here. That only came from interacting with people. So I think we really need to hold on to the idea of what is the experience people have through technology. It doesn't only matter if it's privacy enhancing or secure. What is the quality of the human experience? That's super, super important. So and the last thing I'll add, just from a Canadian perspective, when you mentioned the term sovereignty, in Canada, we have many different Indigenous peoples. We have multiple sovereignties.
And when we think about what it means to preserve and to make sure everybody is engaged in defining their technology strategies, at least for Canada, it's not as simple as thinking about this one way. And so same thing for going onto an online society. In the city of Toronto, 51 languages. How do you do that well when you're building online products, right? Like some of these things that we have that are working well now, we have lots of technical debt, legacy technologies. There's a lot to evolve. So I think when I hear some of the opportunities, I also think we have to think about our histories and how are we honoring, where we are in our international histories through a technology strategy. Because I think that sovereignty and security piece is very, very interesting. But final note, cities being responsible for things that there are international norms around, like infrastructure security. We need to think about who's supposed to manage that. Is that fair that that's municipal, or should that be national, for example? I think there's room to think about the funding models there. But those are three things I took away from the conversation.
Thank you so much. A lot of information. Let's unpack that and go back to the first topic of friction, because friction, of course, in the things we do at Pakhuis de Zwijger is to accommodate public dialogue about things that are going on in society. And you need friction to have a dialogue. Yes. You need friction to have a good discussion and really go to the root of the problem. And if you are just polite to the other person, you don't have a real dialogue. But with digital connection, I don't want friction with my computer. So could you explain it a bit more? Because where would you like the friction to be? You want the connection between the people using it? And is that the problem?
Totally. So think about contact tracing.
Yeah.
Think about what it means when you are terrified and you get a notification on your phone, and you're getting that notification from your phone, not from a human being who might be able to explain to you what to do, because you're immediately panicking about what are you going to do if you have coronavirus? Yeah. What are you going to do? What are your supports? Who do you go to? What's your testing thing? Like, sure, you can load those things onto a mobile device, no problem. But what I'm questioning is that an equitable version of the interactions that we have now with humans? And how do we make sure that these are complementary services? Because especially think of someone who can barely speak English, getting a notification like that on their phone and being alone. And then they call the hospital and there's no test available.
Yeah, that will be amazingly scary. We had a program here in Tech for Society called Can an App Save the World? Of course, the answer was no. This is impossible. This is, well, it's ridiculous.
But one thing because you mentioned the friction and the point of these programs, there's just an example to point out called vTaiwan. And I don't know if anyone here has heard of Polis, but really interesting software that helps people answer questions online and understand where they have points of agreement and points of disagreement. And so there are ways to, again, like it's just supplementing, right? I think this is, thoughtful technology can supplement and augment what's good. Yeah. I think bad technology entrenches and accelerates pre-existing inequities and problems. So I think it's, as always, it's how you do the thing. Much of what Ben said, it's process. So there's lots of opportunity for good friction as well.
And let's go to your line about whether it's the job of the city to do this, or perhaps the national government, or even international cooperation like the European Union. How is Toronto, your city, handling cybersecurity?
I would like to see it handling it a little bit better. I think in Canada, the city of Montreal has different plans for different types of technologies like IoT or 5G, and they're specific to the challenges and opportunities within each technology. The city of Toronto is building a digital infrastructure plan, which was the policy reaction that came out of the Sidewalk Labs process, because part of what our community was saying was, how are we buying something when we haven't even written the requirements from a democratic perspective? So we said, make a plan for how these infrastructures need to work, and then we can procure with more comfort. So we're not just buying what someone's selling us. And I think at the city level, where I get concerned is people trying to solve the problem in the technology when the solution might be much more at a legal or other level. Yeah. So for IoT, securing infrastructure. I mean, you can have access to the data through like IoT and understand
so IoT,
how
Internet
systems
of
are
Things.
working or measure. But are we really trying to make things that are managed through international law? Are we really trying to pull that off through hardware design? Like, I think we also need to understand where the limitations of how a technology works are, and where these issues from a governance perspective should be managed in law, policy, standards. I mean, there's lots of different ways to pull this stuff off. So Toronto is doing okay. We're responding to what we don't have. But I also think we need to be better at understanding what can you do within technology, and then what is broader and bigger, and you shouldn't try to solve it in a technology per se.
So one thing, IoT, of course, Internet of Things. So all these devices connected together, smart fridges, these kind of topics, and they're connected to the internet with all the consequences of that. That is a side note, of course. In Toronto, of course, famously, you had the project called the Sidewalk Lab. You just mentioned it. This was a cooperation between Google and the city of Toronto, where, as you mentioned, a lot of implementation or use of public space was left over to Google. Is it fair to say that you learned a hard lesson from working with big companies like Google when it comes to safety and security?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think it just was we're not ready for this moment for cities. And unfortunately, when cities are so strapped for money, this sort of opportunity to work with companies that are willing to invest in infrastructures because I mean, part of Sidewalk Lab's whole model was that they called it patient capital. They said, well, we'll upfront invest in some of these systems. And because we know that your government isn't interested in spending money, in some of these things. And so that leaves cities super vulnerable. So we learned about that lack of preparedness. But the other little lesson that I would want to share with all of us here was that I think what we saw at the beginning was people were genuinely quite aware of privacy and security issues. And over the years, what Sidewalk Lab started to do was they spoke less and less and less about the technology piece, and more and more and more about clean tech and green tech. And I am quite concerned about greenwashing as something that all of us need to think about with the climate as such a fundamental topic of technology.
A bit of translation,
people don't
Bianca.
Understand that we have big carbon impacts from computing. And so that's something that we learned but didn't really address yet, I think, as a society, is computing has a carbon impact, and we can't going to solve all our environmental problems by more data and more technology.
Great, thank you so much. So this is basically the idea of data centers cost energy to run, but also greenwashing, of course, is the idea that people say they're doing something good for environment, but in the end, they're doing actually a lot worse for society than it is at the first view. Let's go to all four of you. Let's have a discussion all together. Ger, we had a lot of different kinds of discussions tonight. What would you say that the lessons were that Amsterdam took from the Toronto Sidewalk Lab? Of course, we're working a lot together with larger companies. Is that something you looked at?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, the visits at Amsterdam a few times as a good practice. So I like that, actually. Now, but I think there's not really a discussion. We agree a bit too much. Next time we need to involve some people who actually don't like digital rights or something to get a bit more of a discussion, maybe in a panel. But I think the effort I think everybody was very happy that Sidewalk Labs happened in Toronto, because it was about to happen somewhere in the world. So now we had opportunity just to look at it and see what happened, basically. So we learned quite a bit. And it was a expensive lesson for Google and the Sidewalk Lab people as well, I think. But I mean, and now in the Netherlands, you have a few initiatives that are a bit more want to be the smartest neighborhood or whatever. But then we ask 3 questions about, hey, but who owns the data? Do people want to have a discount on their rent when you actually share your data, etc.? I mean, nobody really wants that, is it? So I think it helped us quite a bit to shape and strengthen and to formulate the rules and boundaries we want to operate in. So yes, absolutely, yeah. And we also look at cities like Dubai or Singapore, etc., which actually was many ways comparable to what was happening in Toronto. But the whole concept of democracy, etc., is a bit more important, I would say, in our narrative after initiatives like this. So we started, example, parallel to this, the Citizens Coalition for Digital Rights, where we actually formulate a whole bunch of things that, well, would never be applicable to Sidewalk.
Thank you. And Annette, it's perhaps, we've been talking about the difference between, on one side, the protecting the state and protecting society against these kind of threats. And it's quite hard to pinpoint where on the line you have to sit. Of course, nobody from this group would say that it's just about protecting the state, protecting the government as such. We all would say that protecting society as a whole. But who would be in charge of this? How do you look at that in the Estonia context? So was it more state or was it more society? And where in this line would you be?
That's a full combination. I mean, you can't really separate these two. And I always say, what's the state without like the society or without the people? So they fully work together. But when it comes to protecting the state, what we have realized is that the security actually starts from the very lowest grassroots level. Yeah. So in order to provide the highest security levels, it's actually up to every state to start educating people and to invest more to raising the awareness of every single citizen. Because what we see these days is like, I think it's like 80% of different attacks that happen because people have weak passwords. And this is so ridiculous to think about. I mean, the most simple thing that actually faces us every day. So we fully say that we need to keep investing on different projects that would raise the awareness of every single citizen so that they would know what kind of emails to answer, like Ben mentioned before, that there are so many phishing emails and things like that happening, and then people are receiving them and they don't know what to do. And then this is up to the state to provide this education, and this is what we have been doing here, and then we'll definitely continue as well. So.
Thank you so much. And Ben, we're almost at the end, but what would you say is the bigger threat than the cybersecurity or the overreach of bigger companies in technology?
I would say that there's a need to have this kind of agency within the public administration that allows them to, be able to address both of those things actively. I mean, if they're just waiting, for these things to happen to them, then they're not going to be secure. But the idea that they take, control, architectural control over what their technology looks like, and then they can, shape the response according to all of these other actors in the field.
Thank you. And last question for you, Bianca. What would you say is the impact of Corona? Are we just accelerating these technologies, or is this a true break with the past?
It feels like we're accelerating them, and I have a clear answer for me, the privatization is by far a larger threat, because once you privatize away, as Ben was speaking about, the layer between people and their governments, once you turn that into something that is privatized, you lose accountability. I mean, I don't think governments understand that they're privatizing themselves in a way right now, and that terrifies me. So to me, this is much larger of a threat than cybersecurity, and it's also something that requires public intervention. So I think that coronavirus right now is just accelerating that privatization. Emergency procurement, I mean, there's not enough oversight on state purchasing normally. Now there are requirements being lifted, so it's going even faster. So I think that threat is only increasing right now, unfortunately.
Thank you so much. We have to leave it at that because we're at the end of our program. We talked today to Ger Baron, Chief Technology Officer of the City of Amsterdam, with Annette Noema from Digital Transformation Advisor from Estonia, with Ben Severini from Foundation for Public Code, and of course with Bianca Wiley for Tech Reset Canada. Sorry. There's a lot to talk about. Of course, we will continue these kind of conversations here at Podcast De Zwijger. Our conversations are always free to join. We're always open for the public because the free speech can't be bought. We have to be free. But if you do want to participate and help us a bit, there is a QR code on the screen a bit later. As I told you already, Corona, of course, is really strange. I'm on my own on screen here in a big room with just a few people behind the camera operating the cameras today. That is really strange and not so nice. But the good thing about the whole Corona crisis is that we're building this large library of all kinds of programs, both in Dutch and English. You can watch via YouTube, via our website, dezwijger.nl. And you can all see all these different conversations, dialogues, information about all different kinds of topics. Use that. This is a free treasure trove, all available for you right now. Of course, tomorrow we're back again here in Pakhuis de Zwijger. Next week we're back again with a new topic. And I want to thank you so much. I want to thank everyone for participating and joining us today, and see you in a week's time, then in Dutch, about the security of the city of Amsterdam. Bye.